Hi everyone, it's Bethany from Beth and Books and welcome back to this very sparse book nook. If you saw my latest video, the top 10 dislikes, I don't know what I've titled it, the last video, you all have heard that this is all I've got in my room so far, and it's true, this is the only trolley of goodness, so this is my library right now. But we're coming into the new year, which means amazing, fantastic, exciting new books for the upcoming quarter, and that's what I'm here to share with you about, tell you about. If I miss any books that you think are definitely worth a mention, please leave a cheeky comment down below so I can check it out myself. And if you enjoy this, leave a like and a subscribe to help a small booktuber out. Right, I'm not going to dilly-dally. This video is going to cover January, February and March with an assortment of young adult and adult novels. These are all books that I specifically am really interested in reading about and I'm adding to my own want to read shelves, and I'm keeping an eye out on for when they come. Let's get on with it, shall we? I'm going to move over so I can pop the images up here. The first one I have here is Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. This is a young adult fantasy retelling, and before you guys are like, Bethany, why have you put another retelling on your list? Because it's not a retelling of what I'm going to call classic European tales. This is inspired by the Chinese folklore. So our main character is Xing Yin, and she is the daughter of the moon goddess. Now she lives on the moon, and her mother stole the elixir of immortality from the big god. Now, she herself has power within her, and she doesn't realise she's being hidden away. Is that big god given a name? He's just called the Celestial Emperor. So she's being hidden away from the Celestial Emperor until her magic flares, and suddenly she's found out. Now, what excites me a lot about this book is that then Xing Yin goes and disguises herself. She disguises who she is and kind of infiltrates the Celestial Emperor's kingdom and befriends his son and learns alongside him. And she goes on a quest to save her mother, to defeat beasts, to save herself, alongside the romance subplot that seems to bloom within them. So this just sounds really interesting to me because it is based on like Chinese folklore and their own fairy tales, which is something I'm really interested in. YA fantasy for me recently has become quite monotonous, and when I reviewed why, I think it's because a lot of it is from European writers, and so it feels like you're reading the same thing along with a lot of the time. And I love reading like books from all perspectives and from all cultures and ethnicities. So when I saw this one online, I just had to put it on this list. The next one is To Paradise by let me read his name. Hanya Yanagihara. You might recognise that author's name because he wrote The Little Life. Little Life. Sorry, I've got my notes down here, which is on my shelf and I still need to read. But he's publishing this new novel called To Paradise. And if it's anything like what I've heard A Little Life is amazing, that grammatically made no sense. If A Little Life is as everyone says it is, which is amazing, then I'm sure this will be amazing too, and I'd love to read this before, like A Little Life. It gets out of my grasp. It feels like it was published so long ago. I haven't got around to it, so I'm hoping this one I can get my hands on decently quickly so I can read it as soon as possible. Now, it's an adult literary novel and it's set in alternate 1893 New York, which honestly sounds really interesting. 1893 New York is an era I don't know much about, so I was intrigued, and then they said alternate, so I was like, yo, count me in. We then have a 1993 Manhattan perspective and a 2093 perspective. So we've got three different perspectives and from different times and from different kind of eras in time, and each world perspective, it's talking about love and music and what makes you human. So it's going to be really hard-hitting, I can feel that already. To just quote the blurb a little bit, the last line in this book's sell point is, "The great power of this remarkable novel is driven by Yanagihara's understanding of the aching desire to protect those we love. partners, lovers, children, friends, family, and even our fellow citizens, and the pain that ensues when we cannot. It sounds really intense, really emotional, and I'm here for it. I'm all for that human pain and suffering and morbidity, but also, you know, the positives that come with the human experience. To go from that, I don't want to call it morbid, I haven't read it, I don't know if that is the vibe, but we go to an adult romance. This is The Weather Girl by Rachel Lynn Solomon, and this sounds just like the perfect happy-go-lucky kind of romance. We have a meteorologist and someone else who she works with, and they're trying to get their bosses back together, like the Parent Trap, but of their bosses, and they fall in love instead. I mean, I'm assuming that's what happens. In fact, I think that's probably the best way to explain this book. It's the Parent Trap, but with adult meteorologist, working people trying to get their bosses back together, and then they end up falling in love themselves. Ding! Also, this is the same author who wrote The X Talk, a book I haven't read but have seen everywhere, so I'm assuming The X Talk is good, so I'm kind of hoping this is good too. Continuing with the romance theme, but moving into a historical YA, I bring you Anatomy. First of all, just check out how smart this cover is. It's in the shape of an heart, but if you look closely, it's a person and their dress is like splayed out like that. I find it fascinating. Now, this is 1817 Edinburgh, and we have I always do this, two main characters, not a fourth, two main characters. One is a wannabe surgeon, but she is a she, and of course in the world of history, women aren't smart enough to be surgeons. So what she does is she has to practice, but of course they're not going to help her by giving her the bodies to practice on. So that's when we bring in our second character, and he is, from my understanding, basically someone who gets dead bodies to bury or to cremate. They call him a resurrection man in the Blab. I don't really know what that means, I'm going to be honest with you all, but they basically work together so that, you know, I'm assuming there's some sort of mutual collaboration where they both benefit each other in this, and then they themselves become, you know, it's got a romance subplot. Romance is it's classified as a historical romance. Why am I so spazzy right now? But yeah, that's what the book is. I'm intrigued by this dark gothicness coming through, but also this idea of seeing sexism in play and seeing a woman overcome that by solving her own problems. Yes, she needs a man to help her out, but I'm hoping it isn't a situation where the man comes to her like a, you know, minstrel in distress. She's able to go out and solve her problems herself. We then leave behind the romance for a good old adult dark thriller called Good Rich People. Now this sounds fascinating to me. It follows a wealthy couple. They're just insanely rich. They're doing really well for themselves. And what they do is they invite over self-made millionaires, successful people to live in their guest house for a little bit. And this idea of being like, hey, come on over. Let's talk about how we can make you even better. Talk about career stuff, yada, yada, yada. But the rich couple basically conspires to undermine the guests that come into their guest house. They are trying to ruin these self-made people's lives. But then we have the second perspective, Demi. Demi is the person who comes into the guest house and she can smell something fishy, and basically it's like a battle of the wits. So it's just that premise, right? That premise. It sounds fascinating. I can't be the only one. Yeah. Hey guys, sorry it is a different version of me that you're seeing right now. When I went to edit the last half of the video for this clip, from the original take, I could not stand the lighting. I don't know, the sun must have been going in and out. It was ridiculous lighting, so I'm refilming it for you. So let's just dive right into it. We have Tahera Murphy's new series called This Woven Kingdom, and it's This Woven Kingdom is book 1 in This Woven Kingdom. This is a YA fantasy novel, and I have to give you guys a heads up. There's going to be a decent amount of YA fantasy novels, and I'll explain why later on. But let's talk about Tahera Mafi. No doubt you've heard of her, and to be honest, that's why this book is on this list. Part of my job, not that this is a job, I'm not earning anything from it, but you know what I mean. Part of what I perceive as my role is talking about books and telling you if they're worth picking up the hype. Oh my gosh, if they're worth picking up or if they're overhyped. So this is one I do want to look into and see if it is actually worth buying when it comes out. But what is it about? So the best way I can explain this is we have a kingdom, and this kingdom has been destroyed, won over by its enemy, and now the enemies are in place in this kingdom. Now our main female character, Alize, was the original princess. If you watch The Witcher, much like Ciri is the original princess, right? So she's no longer the princess, she's now having to serve as a servant for the usurpers. So that's the one main character. On the flip side, we have the new king's son, and he is called Cameron. Now, the thing underweaving all of this is that our female character is the one who is prophesied to overthrow and kill the king, the new king. So this book is basically a power play between the trope of overruled princess getting her revenge, and this is why I want to look into it. This is a YA fantasy trope that I've seen quite a bit, and quite frankly has become a bit boring, so I've put it on here to see if Tahera Mafi can spice it up a little bit. And I'm also here for the romance subplot. I hope there's an enemies to lovers, because your gal loves it. Unashamedly, proudly loves a good enemies to lovers, although I then get really personally affected if it's a bad one. But anyway, let's keep the ball rolling. Should I say the film rolling? What a lame pun. Next up we have You Truly Assumed by Layla Sabrine. Now this one I picked up mainly because I just think it sounds like a really important topic. We have 3 Muslim gals, and it follows the after effects of a terrorist attack. I cannot speak today, which was done by someone who was Muslim. And so, as the world often does, very racistly then stereotypes that everyone of that culture, that identity is the same as that one person who did the horrible thing. You know how it is. And so these friends, these 3 girls, these 3 friends, start a blog to share their perspective and to let their voice be heard in a safe way, because they're experiencing a crap ton of racism when they had nothing to do with the terrorist attack. People are just being racist because the terrorist was Muslim and they're Muslim. And then what happens, however, is this blog, this place of safety, no longer feels safe for them because it blows up in a, oh, that might not have been the best description. It gets famous. It gets famous because lots of other Muslim youth and just Muslim people find solace in what the girls are writing about. But of course, with fame comes the haters, and so this place no longer feels safe, and it's a conversation about whether it's worth the trolling, worth the online hatred to keep the safe space going. So I think that in itself is a really important perspective. And also, with a bit of a teacher hat on, I'm picking this up because I think it could potentially be a really, really good novel to teach, just like I'm going to teach an Angie Thomas book next year / this year, whenever this is published, which I'm so excited about. Next we have a book from an author I have never heard about. Her name is Rebecca Ross, and this is A Rivet Enchanted, which is the start of a new series. And this one, I think it gives me slight Starless Sea vibes, which is one of my favourite books of all time. So that's mainly why it's on this list. It's also on this list because it has a Scottish vibe. So our main character, we've got 2, but our main character is Jack. Now he goes to use the words from the Blab, sorry I keep looking at my notes, to use the words from the Blab, they're at an isle, to use their words. So in my mind it's like a Scottish isle, but I don't think it's necessarily set on Earth. But he goes there to study, and he notices that lots of youth are disappearing. And long story short, he ends up trying to figure out where these youth are going. It's suspicious. There's like a mystery thriller element under this. But he ends up having to work with Cadence, who is like a childhood enemy. and they end up having to work together to figure out what's happening to all these victims. This is also a fantasy, but the blurb doesn't tell me much apart from using the word spirits. So I think it's meant to be understood that there's almost like a gothic spirits, enchantment, dark academic vibe to this novel. But it's also, I just want to share, although it sounds like it's setting up for enemies to lovers, in the Goodreads little sections, romance isn't tagged as one of them. So it might just be platonic friendship, but it might also involve much more. I don't know. I'm picking this up because I'm intrigued. I'm just intrigued by the atmosphere it's giving me. This one, I don't need to talk much about. House of Sky and Breath. I always want to call it Crescent City. Second book in the Crescent City series. Is it actually a big series or is it only a duology? No, it looks like it's going to be a trilogy. Guilty pleasure reading. I loved the first book. It's a massive book, but I read it electronically, which I think helped me get through the pages. I read Blood and Earth. I think that's what it's called. Like I say, I always want to call it Crescent City. I read book 1 electronically in a couple of days, like non-stop. I'm not even exaggerating when I say I started reading it, put it down at 2 in the morning, woke up at 7 in the morning and kept reading it. I promise you I'm not exaggerating. So this is a book I'm definitely buying as soon as it comes out. So this is one that's a hard yet. I don't need to talk about it. Moving on. We then get to The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea, which is yet another YA fantasy. Now, you'll notice a little bit of a theme. There's a lot of Asian authors and Asian myth, folklore inspired novels on my list for this quarter. And that's because I'm just intrigued by this perspective. I mentioned in the earlier half of this video how I've read a lot of Western YA fantasy, and I just want to read a lot more Eastern. I hope I've got my compass. I'm honestly having such a hard day articulating thoughts today. But yeah, so this is based off of a, I don't know quite what the word here to use is, a folk tale, a myth. I'm not too sure, it doesn't say in the blurb, but we follow Mina. Now, Mina lives in a village where it's constantly getting flooded and ruined, and just weather is battering it to the point where people can't grow things, they're starving. Poverty, basically, is the state that Mina's village is living in. Now, in a way for her village to try and appease the god who they think is, what's his name? The ocean god? Sea god. They think the sea god is the one wreaking this havoc upon their village. So they try to appease him by sacrificing the most beautiful person from their village every year into the ocean. It's not Mina, it's Mina's brother's betrothed who is chosen to be the sacrifice. Now, Mina's brother wants to go out and stop her from being sacrificed, which would be a death sentence for Mina's brother. So Mina stops her brother, very much like Katniss saving her little sister in the Hunger Games, and sacrifices herself in the place of her brother's betrothed. But what she discovers is actually the sea god is not wreaking havoc. He's in a deep sleep, very much like Zeus. Is that who I'm thinking of? Who's Thor's daddy? Like Thor's daddy goes into a big sleep, the sea god has gone into a big deep sleep. So she's basically trying to figure out a way to stop him from sleeping, and she faces all sorts of fantastical beings. It sounds amazing. Sounds amazing. I want it. From there, my ankles are numb. From there we move into March, and we start off with Sabaa Tahir's new novel. Again, one on my list because she's an author that I'm very aware will probably get a lot of hype, and I want to be able to tell you guys what my honest thoughts are on this. Now, this is on my rage and is a standalone novel from what I can tell at the moment. You know what authors are like. Sometimes they decide to make it into a duology. 20 years down the line, Margaret Atwood. Sorry, what? Now, this is young adult, but it's a contemporary, a break from the fantasy. And from my understanding, it seems like there's a couple of different perspectives. I'm not going to lie, the blurb kind of confuses me. We have Pakistan then and California now. So I'm assuming Pakistan was in the past. Now we follow a couple of characters from the past who are newly married through an arranged marriage, and their young life is shaken by tragedy, so they open a motel in America. In America? Yeah, they move to the United States. Then it jumps to the now, and we're in California. We follow a different set of people and their own life, and somehow these stories entwine. I won't lie, the blurb doesn't really excite me, but I want to know what it's all about. I want to know. It's what happens when you have a very famous author, but I'm not saying, this isn't like a Sarah J Maas. I'm not going to buy it. I'm going to get it from the library when I feel like reading it. But yeah, also if you love her, just so you know, that's out. Alright, we have another YA fantasy. This is called 1,000 Steps into the Night, and it is another this is Japanese, another Asian inspired tale. Now, in the original take, I'm gonna stand by what I said. It's kind of like Shrek, in that our main character Miyako is cursed, much like Fiona was cursed to turn into an ogre. Now Miyako is cursed to turn into a demon, and in her world, demons, spirits, everything lives side by side with humans. Everyone is aware of everyone else, but she is cursed to turn into a demon when it touches her. So naturally, she goes on a quest, not Shrek, she goes on a quest to try and cure herself of this. However, along the way, she starts to realise that her curse also gives her a ridiculous amount of power. And so it becomes a little bit of a debate around, do I keep my power and learn to manage it, but risk people? I don't know. And I'm just really intrigued by it. I feel like I say that a lot in these types of videos. It's the whole point of them, Bethany. You're there on your list because generally you're intrigued. Okay, another one that is on here because of the author, and that is Gallant by V.E. Schwab. Not a series though, a standalone, which actually makes me more excited because as someone who is well known for her series, I'm very intrigued to see how she does in a standalone book. Okay, Bethany. Now this follows Olivia, who has basically been in a girls' school. She doesn't really have any ties to her family. I'm pretty sure her mum is dead, sadly passed away, because Blab says the only thing she has of her mother is a journal her mum wrote. And one day she gets summoned to this house from school. They send a letter to school and it's like, yo, Olivia, come to this place. And it's like a family house that she's never heard of or known before. And basically when she gets there, it's weird, it's haunted, it's spooky, there's some fantasy element going on here. And she's like, you know what, this is weird, but it's the only place that's ever felt like home for me. So she's determined to stick it out. And then one day, as she's exploring, she discovers almost like a portal, like a doorway, where she can step into this realm, let's call it, which is full of spirits and ghosts. And she starts to figure out, oh, this is probably why my family often is a bit crazy. So I am very intrigued. I do love a good atmospheric novel, so that's V.E. Schwab. Next up we have The Lost Dreamer, Inda. Inda is someone who can basically prophesize. She's able to dream and figure out what's going to happen in the future. And her kind of, can I say people with her power are accepted until the king dies. And then his son, who steps up to take his place, doesn't want to honour that tradition. And it sounds like basically all of these seers, these dreamers, are hunted for their power. Witch hunting style. We then have Saya, who has the same gift as India, but she's never received training, and her mother has just taken advantage of her, going from village to village, pretending she's the one with the sight, giving people their fortunes, and, you know, making a business off of her daughter. Somehow these two characters unite, form a little sistership, and kind of fight the battle of identity and saving yourself or saving your home, battling with having power in a place which doesn't respect your power. It sounds like a good fantasy novel that isn't going to be full of the same tropes that I'm used to. Two left. The second to last one is a Three Musketeers retelling, but they're all females. This is called a Robin Hood remix. I just love how they didn't say Robin Hood retelling. They said a Robin Hood remix. It is what it is. It is what it says it is. It's Robin Hood, but with 3 women. And also Goodreads has a little LGBT heading thingy. So I'm sure we can assume that there is a female-female romance in there somewhere, which is cool. I mentioned in my favourite books video that I needed to read more female-female romance novels. So yay. I don't feel like I need to explain this one more. Okay, the last one is kind of weird. It's called Magic Steeped in Poison. I think this is a debut author. Yeah, it is a debut author and it's first in a duology. Now, this sounds amazing. Cover aside, so many of these novels, actually, a lot of the Asian authors' novels, the covers are so beautiful. Anyway, this novel sounds kind of preposterous and I love it, without it being taken too far. Our main character is Ming. Now, Ming's mum dies and she's really sad about it, but she carries extra guilt because she did it. She accidentally poisoned her mother's tea. Not great start, Ming. And then her sister is also suffering from the same poison. Introducing a competition. So let me introduce a competition that Ming then enters. In this competition, she has to fight, and I quote, masters of the ancient and magical art of tea making. I don't know what a competition involves that involves tea making. Perfect temperature, perfect teabagging motion. I'm intrigued. And then if you win, you then get to receive a favour from the princess. So she's obviously trying to save her sister. Mum's passed away, so she can't help Mum. But do you see what I mean? It sounds kind of weird, but I'm totally here for it. So that is definitely on my list. All right, guys, thank you so much for bearing with my inarticulate stuttering along the way. But I've always said I make no apologies for who I am, and we're chill here. We're just a family of people who love to read books, and these are the books I'm really excited for coming up in the next 3 months. So if I have missed out any books, please let me know below. If you've added any of these to your TBR, please let me know down below. And of course, if you've enjoyed your time here, a cheeky like and subscribe to help a small booktuber out is very gratefully received. All right, enjoy all the places you go in your own reading adventures, and I'll see you in the next video. I don't know what this is. I'm pouring you. Bye. Honestly, I'm loopy.